Welcome to the motherfucking lady. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Dalton Smith versus Subriel Matias. Let's talk about the fight.
Not the outcome I expected.
I have to admit that I was wrong. I thought that Subriel Matias, through his persistent pressure and durability, would be able to wear down and wear out Dalton Smith, but that was not the case from the opening stanza. Dalton Smith was the better fighter of the two, very busy with his lead, busy with his jab, circling Subriel Matias, not giving up ground, but instead working around him.
Bringing over the backhand, whacking him with it.
Backing up and backing off Subriel Matias, Dalton Smith established very early in the fight that he was not afraid of Subriel Matias, his reputation. He wasn't afraid to trade with him. He asserted himself.
I gave Dalton Smith the first round. I gave Dalton Smith the second round. Subriel doesn't really start finding his way into this fight until second or third round.
But by then I had him down at least 2 rounds, with Dalton Smith getting off to a strong start, which we often see in Subriel's fights. In the Ergashev fight, in the Jeremias Ponce fight, guys usually get the best of Subriel at the start, and gradually he starts to wear them down. The pace catches up, they start taking punishment here.
At least for a moment, rounds 3 and 4, it did start to look like Dalton Smith was running out of steam.
A few moments there, it did look like Dalton Smith was starting to tire, having exerted so much energy in the first 2. Subriel's getting off combinations. Subriel is getting in with those combinations and doing damage, opening up a cut over what I believe was Dalton Smith's left eye.
But Dalton hang tough.
He's falling in, collapsing the pocket, smothering Subriel Matias' work, doing a bit of work on the inside. It looked a lot like Dalton Smith was getting tired, though he never stopped fighting. He never stopped trying. Through rounds 3 and 4, 4 and 5.
Round 5, it looked like Dalton Smith had found his second win. He gets back in the fight.
And in round 6, he closes the show off a jab-right-hand combination. Several jab-right-hand combinations that visibly staggered the reigning champion.
Subriel wasn't wearing those punches well.
Now in the build-up, I spent a lot of time talking about Subriel Matias' durability and how up until this point, well, he's been able to hold a shot, he's been able to take some punishment. At some point, that chin is going to give out, but I didn't think it was going to be this weekend.
That aggressive approach is the kind of thing that works up until it doesn't. I guess it didn't work for Subriel this weekend. He finally took one too many.
So I don't expect him to be the same after this. Up until this weekend, Subriel Matias had never been stopped. He had never been knocked out. Once that chin finally gives out, it stays out. Not dissimilar from what you saw from Joe Joyce after the 2 knockout losses to Zhilei Zhang.
I mean, he's not going to be the same after that. His punch resistance. You can expect that if Subriel keeps fighting, he may keep getting knocked out from here on out. Dalton
registers as the 5th world champion that hails from the United Kingdom. Remember that not that long ago, the UK was down to 1 champion, just 1 guy in Nick Ball. That became Lewis Crocker. Jazza Dickens, that became Fabio Wardley.
Now Dalton Smith.
Dalton makes 5. After the fight, Eddie Hearn took to calling out Adam Azim, who has a fight coming up against seasoned veteran Gustavo Lemos. I personally think at this point, Dalton Smith is beyond Adam Azim. Adam doesn't have anything that Dalton needs or that Dalton wants. Dalton is the world champion, whereas Adam is still finding creative ways.
Still reheating everybody else's sloppy seconds in the microwave.
But because it is a fight that can be built in the United Kingdom, and it is a fight that you can sell in the United Kingdom, Eddie Hearn is still beating that drum for the Adam Azim fight, though I don't expect Adam to march to the beat of that drum. I don't expect Ben Shalom to be in any hurry to make that fight, least of all when Dalton Smith just traveled to America and took out the Puerto Rican bogeyman.
It's the second time that's happened to Subriel.
When Liam Paro traveled to his native island of Puerto Rico and upset him there, now Dalton Smith traveling to New York City. Unless I'm mistaken, Subriel Matias was the betting favorite in the both of those fights, the Paro fight and the Smith fight.
I don't expect him to be the same after this. Like Joe Joyce was not the same after the 2 knockout losses to Zhilei Zhang, Subriel will not be the same after this knockout loss to Dalton Smith.
The biggest losers here have to be Fresh Productions, who paid through the nose to win the rights to this fight, to do the fight on their terms the way they wanted it, and they did. just for their man to lose.
Beating out Matchroom at the purse bid with a winning bid of $1.9 million, investing quite a bit in the career of Subriel that did not pan out. Why does it seem that every time they try to roll out the red carpet for Subriel, whether it's a homecoming fight in Puerto Rico or winning the rights to the fight to do it in New York, it never works out for this guy?
Well, that's unfortunate.
And what was a mostly entertaining show, with the running theme of the night being the Mexico versus Puerto Rico rivalry, you will notice that a good number of the fights on the undercard pitted Puerto Rican fighters against Mexican fighters.
Not very good Mexican fighters, but Mexican fighters still. On more than one occasion, I've seen Fresh Productions use this theme for their shows that they mostly do on the island of Puerto Rico, and they mostly had success, save the main event.
So Eddie Hearn was ringside, and I wondered about that during fight week in the build-up. Would he make the trip to support his man Dalton Smith in what would be a half-empty arena?
He did.
Things went belly up for Fresh Productions. They really did, because they invested a lot of money in order to be able to do this, and for what it costed you and for how it panned out, you may as well have let Matchroom do it.
The way it panned out, Matchroom didn't have to pay for anything. They didn't even have to pay their fighter. But now leaves New York City with his O intact and belt in hand.
One of 4 reigning champions in today's super lightweight division. What can we expect for Dalton moving forward? Well, I remember hearing that the winner of this fight would then have to face former champion Alberto Puello.
A fight that could prove to be a difficult fight for Dalton Smith if it comes into fruition. Alberto Puello, like Matthew Germain, is a mover and a jabber and a boxer. The guy that Dalton fought right before this,
The one who fought like he's got ants in his pants. The one who spent all night on the perimeter of the ring circling away. We know that's how Alberto fights, except Alberto is a cut above a Matthew Germain. And I don't want to see Dalton Smith lose his belt to that guy.
the stakes are high enough and the jeopardy is enough that I don't actually want that fight to happen. I'm hoping that Matchroom and Eddie Hearn can pay whoever they have to pay at the WBC to stay such an order. I've no interest in Smith versus Puello, and I'm more interested in Dalton Smith taking that belt back to Sheffield, having a homecoming fight against a voluntary, which he's earned.
Then maybe seeing about unifying titles with one of the other champions at the weight. Remember, there are 4 of them. There's Dalton Smith holding the WBC, Gary Antoine Russell holding the WBA, the winner of Stevenson versus Lopez holding the WBO, and Hitchins holding the IBF.
Been saying it throughout. The super lightweight division, in spite of being a pit stop, is in many ways a more glamorous division here today than the glamour weight, welterweight.
It's deeper. It's got that many more fights, that many more contenders, capable ones.
There are that many good fights to make at super lightweight, more so than welter. I'm not interested in those junior varsity kids that are up there. 140 is a lot more interesting to me, and I'm more interested in seeing Dalton Smith have a voluntary in Sheffield than perhaps unifying titles with one of these guys.
That's how you want to see a guy win a belt. Ideally, that is how you want to see a champion crowned. You often hear it said that the challenger has to take the title from the champion. That's what Dalton did. He didn't eke out a decision.
He didn't win it by the skin of his teeth. He went in there and knocked Subriel Matias' block off. Now, even though I maintain that this fight and that card should not have been a pay-per-view, it shouldn't have been behind a paywall, it was still an entertaining card for what it was worth. I would say more entertaining than last year's Times Square show that costed about as much as this one did. This one provided more thrills, more spills.
Still don't think it should have been a pay-per-view, but if I compare it to the Times Square show, this one was a lot more entertaining.
Congratulations to Dalton Smith, who rose to the occasion and exceeded my expectations elsewhere in the division as it pertains to one of the other champions at the weight. According to Chava, ESPN, championship opportunity very close to materializing for Oscar Duarte. The migraine will be challenging on February 21st for the IBF title against Richardson Hitchins, the IBF champion, on what is the undercard of Ryan Garcia versus Mario Barrios.
Wait a minute, what happened to Landolfo Delgado? Didn't IBF just order Richardson Hitchins to fight him?
They did, but that order has since been rescinded since the IBF found out they ordered that fight a bit prematurely, and Richardson Hitchins still has enough wiggle room to schedule a voluntary. She is reported to be scheduling against Oscar Duarte in a fight that, stylistically, I don't think favors him. I feel like the opponent choices have gone from bad to worse for Richardson Hitchins, from Jermaine Ortiz, who he walked away from,
on the undercard of Stevenson versus Lopez,
to Landolfo Delgado, who he was ordered to fight by the IBF. Not exactly a great fighter, but more of a threat than Jermaine Ortiz would have been.
he's an aggressive guy.
To now Oscar Duarte, who is even more aggressive than Landolfo Delgado and has been looking good fight by fight. Ever since his knockout loss to Ryan Garcia, Oscar Duarte has gone from strength to strength, looking very impressive, mauling Kenny Sims in what was his last fight.
And he's a big 140.
Oscar Duarte is a mid-range to inside pressure fighter, an aggressive one, a big one, bigger than Gustavo Lemos, who gave Richardson Hitchins fits when they fought. To a lot of people, Gustavo should have won that fight. So if that's what you had to go through with an Argentinian garden gnome,
What are you gonna have to go through with a real Mexican slugger? A big one.
so now I have my reservations as to whether or not this fight will materialize, will happen, because what's in it for Richardson Hitchins? What does he get out of giving Oscar Duarte an opportunity?
Maybe an increase in pay, an opportunity to box on a big show, or what is supposed to be a big show, Barrios versus Garcia.
For what is maybe a big purse, I question how big it is, since it really is Golden Boy Promotions at the helm of the promotion, and they don't have a reputation for paying fighters handsomely, paying generously. I question whether or not Hitchins versus Duarte will materialize. Now, if it does, and Richardson Hitchins bites, he's in danger of losing the red and gold belt. Because how is he going to keep Oscar Duarte off when Oscar is just as aggressive as a Gustavo Lemos with more size, with more power?
Stylistically, that is not an easy fight for a finesse fighting kind of fighter like Richardson Hitchins.
But that is the story according to Chava ESPN. Behind the scenes, they're working on this fight. I like this fight more than the Ortiz fight. I like this fight more than the Landolfo Delgado fight. As a fan, I feel that this is a more fun fight to watch.
That it will be a more fun fight to watch than those fights would have been.
Not only that, I think the state at the weight, the division, would be a lot better off if somebody else had the red and gold title than Richardson Hitchins. I'm not a fan of pure boxers. That's what he is. That's how he fights, and that's style.
It's not entertaining.
Even if it's effective in spots, it's not casual friendly. You won't turn over many new boxing fans showing them a Richardson Hitchins fight, or really any fight involving a pure boxer, because when a pure boxer is fighting their fight and winning their fight, well, not a lot is going on.
Boring.
I know that you have a few sweet science nerds out there who might be able to appreciate the feints and the footwork, couple of hipsters.
The subtleties.
But it's really not the hipsters and the hardcores that move the needle, it's the casuals, and that's what boxing needs more of. So you need more fighters that have a more fan-friendly style to make boxing exciting again. So that if Oscar Duarte does get his crack at the apple at Richardson Hitchins, I have a rooting interest in Oscar Duarte, just because he's more fun to watch.
Gotta get back to that, man. Beyond the brand names and it's supposed to be the prestige.
Boxing has to be entertaining, because that's the file cabinet you'd file it under. Entertainment.
It's that entertainment I'm hoping that Zuffa-boxing can provide towards the end of this month when they launch. The Zuffa-boxing era on Paramount Plus will kick off in Las Vegas January 23rd when undefeated Irish junior middleweight prospect Callum Walsh faces seasoned veteran Carlos Ocampo in the main event at the UFC Apex. Zuffa executive and UFC CEO Dana White made the announcement on the Stephen A. Smith show this past Friday. The event will occur the day before UFC 324, which will be headlined by Justin Gaethje taking on Paddy Pimblett for the interim UFC lightweight title at the T-Mobile Arena. Walsh, 24, has been lauded by White for several years. with many of Walsh's fights featured on UFC Fight Pass. He was last in action in the co-main event of Crawford's win over Canelo Alvarez in September, when Walsh won a narrow UD over Fernando Vargas Jr. Walsh will get the opportunity to headline Zuffa-boxing's inaugural boxing event and set the tone for what the promotion has to offer. Ocampo, 30, has won 3 consecutive fights since being stopped in the first round by Tim Tszyu in June of 2023. Ocampo's other 2 losses were to current unified junior middleweight champion Sebastian Fundora and former unified welterweight champion Errol Spence Jr. When I talk about matchmaking, I'm going to have all these up-and-coming guys, White said. We have this kid named Ocampo, who is a seasoned vet. His only losses are in title fights, 3 title fight losses. He has more knockouts than Callum has fights. Callum, undefeated 15-0, and it's the main event, should be a badass boxing event. White has touted Zuffa's entry into boxing and suggests that Zuffa-boxing will be a game changer for the sport that will offer quality matchmaking and debut a promotion with its own world titles and ranking system.
Sounds good, but careful that this isn't just shoulder programming for what UFC events he's putting on Paramount Plus. It will take more than just Callum Walsh and Carlos Ocampo to monopolize boxing the way people think Zuffa wants to monopolize boxing.
I've been talking smack about boxing for a long time, and now it's time for me to put my money where my mouth is, White said. I'm going to get rid of the sanctioning organizations. The best will fight the best. We're going to sign all the young up-and-coming guys.
The best will fight the best? You mean the best of Zuffa, as Zuffa in and of itself doesn't necessarily represent the best of boxing.
If you break into the top 10 and you're still undefeated, your undefeated record means something, you know what I mean? Everybody's undefeated in boxing because nobody fights anybody, right? Everybody will fight everybody.
Asterisk. Everybody at Zuffa will fight everybody else at Zuffa, but if all you have at Zuffa are B and C and D tier fighters, what does that really mean in the greater scheme of things? That's why I keep saying Zuffa can be successful in its own way, but they're not going to take over boxing because they don't have the ingredients to do it. If all you needed to take over boxing was Callum Walsh versus a couple of stiffs, then Tom Loeffler in 360 would have took it over a long time ago. It's why there has to be an emphasis on matchmaking and entertainment value at Zuffa, since they won't have the brand name boxers.
You can make up for it in the violence that you provide. It is violence, after all, brutality that draws people to combat sports in the first place. So Dana White has to make sure that at minimum he's providing that. I'm not one of these guys that's rooting for Zuffa-boxing to fail. They've sparked my curiosity, but I don't see a situation where the other game in town need to be shaken in their boots that Callum Walsh is headlining a Zuffa show at the Apex. Ooh.